Welcome to the One Hand at a Time podcast. I'm your host, Chris Welton. And this is another example of how you connect with people when you go to events. I think the last several episodes of my podcast has been from just meeting someone else and connecting at an event we were at. So, Antonio, welcome to the show. We met really at dinner one night, right? Like, is that how we all met?
Yeah. So once, thank you for having me on. And two, it's funny how we met because we kind of do the same model that you have, which is why I think we get along so well on how to really maximize relationships, especially when you're going to events. And I think having a podcast is a huge piece of that because it's less frictional because you're not trying to sell somebody on your stuff. You're just genuinely trying to connect when you go to these networking events. And so kind of one of the strategies, I guess, quote unquote, that you would say we use when we go to events, especially if we're speaking and we're being edified by the subject matter expert that's running the event. So it was three of us, me, Claudio, and Landon. Claudio was speaking that day. So what we do the first night of the event, which is the night before that we speak, we book out the best steakhouse at the hotel and we book out a private room for, 13 to 15 people. And now it's our job to go connect with 10 more people to go fill the room. And, somehow we connected with you, Brian, and some other folks, and we just had an awesome time. There's no trying to pitch anything, no selling anything. And then somehow, we speak the next day. Now there's a little bit more of an edification, and we just find ourselves finding ways to maximize each other's ecosystem. So that's exactly how we met.
Yeah, I was just on a coaching call with a client a few minutes ago, and we were talking about the importance of building relationships before we do business. Like, everybody's always trying to do business and then hope the relationship works out. Having a steak dinner with people after you left an event, and there was nobody in the room that was the same. It was awesome. The table was amazing, and we were able to really go deep in just conversations about life in general before we really talked about business strategies. And I just flew out to Dallas like 3 weeks ago to be on Amberly Lago's podcast, which is an amazing opportunity. She was somebody who was at dinner with us that night. And then what do? We turn around, we go to an event 3 weeks later. You and I are on the same flight to Dallas for the event for Renee, right? And Amber Lee showed up at the event as well. But I used to be the guy that would go to these events and like maybe go half a day, and then I'm in the bar, especially Vegas, right? I go half a day and I'm in the poker room and I'm whatever. And I realized that I wasn't getting anything from it. Like, I was just the same stuff, the same notebook full of notes sitting in the corner. And it's really about getting that VIP ticket to an event and then the relationships. I just want your take from that on what you think about that.
Yeah. And so I've created some bit of a formula around this because I've organically done this over the last 5 years. And I'm 27 years old right now. I got into business for myself around 21, 22. And I had to figure out a way to come off more authentic to start building my network because, people weren't going to, like, my age was going to be a detriment when I was trying to do business, especially in the world of, at the time, financial advising and consulting and things like that. So my number one step, which I realize now, is if you want to start building an incredible network, make yourself valuable first. So the first thing that I had to start doing was getting really radical about my own personal development because I have to become someone that somebody else wants to connect with first. We talk about this awesome referral network that we started to create, but am I even referable? I have to make myself referable, which comes down to getting in the gym, getting my mindset work done and all that stuff. So it's that concept of filling up your cup first so that eventually you can pour into others. So with that, I was the same way at those events because it was a little bit of a self-confidence thing on my end of like, am I even someone somebody wants to connect with? Then after you start to make yourself valuable, then you can layer on the value adds that you can start providing to other ecosystems. And I think the podcast is such an awesome way because I'm no longer in a situation where I connect with someone that I have to try and force my specific core offering on them or try and make them a client. It's literally like, hey, let's connect. I would love to have you on the podcast and continue to edify you, blow up your ecosystem. If you start to connect even further through that shared experience on the podcast, then we can continue to find a path to not only maybe do business together, but tap into each other's ecosystems, which is a much larger opportunity down the road. So that's kind of my philosophy around it.
You get into those rooms, you find like-minded people. That's why, again, I started investing in the higher ticket, the nicer ticket. That's why I fly first class, because the people that I want to meet are in first class, or they're in the green room or the VIP room or whatever it is at the events we go to. And that's how we or able to connect with other people. And I agree. I think a lot of people though, Antonio, are really good at that initial phase of meeting people on a friendship basis, but then they have they struggle with connecting that to asking for them to do business. Right? Was that a struggle for you at all? I mean, like you great, like obviously you're good conversation. You're not afraid to have those conversations, but did you ever have a problem converting that into income?
It's a great question. I think initially, when you haven't built up enough evidence to your subconscious that you are valuable enough to others, where they are going to benefit more from connecting with you than not, right? Now I have the confidence to continuously pursue a business relationship because I know it's going to benefit them more than it is for me. And we do that more so in the form of creating joint ventures as opposed to trying to pursue people for clients. When you have such a great offer and you can articulate it in such a way that it's attractive to the right people, they're going to come find you anyway. And you're more creating this like waiting list effect of them coming to you as opposed to you always have to go aggressively there. On the joint venture side and building out ecosystem partnerships, I think that's where like empathetically being aggressive on that side of continuously having touch points. You know, for example, you do an incredible job of sending out the Jordan. If anyone is a remotely a human being that you want to connect with, they're going to respond to you sending them a Jordan. It's a, relatively to what the opportunity could be, it's a relatively low cost, and they kind of weed themselves out initially. If they don't respond, perfect, then you know that's not somebody you want to connect with. Or if they do respond, that creates a next action step in the relationship to start building out something further. So to answer your question kind of full circle, I think it really all comes back to what are my habits initially, and am I doing that for a long enough time to then be so secure in pursuing that person for their benefit, not mine.
Yeah, I mean the one Jordan, just the whole philosophy behind it, again, was just connecting with people that wouldn't answer the phone for Chris Walton, like because they don't know who I am, and nothing against them, but they get called by people all the time, right? So how did we do something different than that? And I wanted to get into the age part because obviously that's a big factor. I mean, I've referred you to a bunch of my clients and friends, and it's funny, only one of them has said, "Do you know how old Antonio is?" I'm like, I have no idea. I knew you were younger. But what's that like when you're talking to people? Because the type of clientele I've introduced you to, they're all pretty. So,
Yeah, these are
got some
mega high
they're
performers
good.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And was there any imposter syndrome when you started talking to people about that kind of moving that kind of money around and making those kind of tax decisions?
Huge imposter syndrome that was ultimately just head trash because I think we're now, moving towards this economy of I can even no longer play the young card because, most of my clients, not most, but like a good portion of my clients are 20 years old, can't even legally drink and are making millions of dollars. And so now we're in this economy where the older generation is starting to be super receptive to feedback of younger people because it's so much easier to understand IP now. We have so much more access to information where you can just simply pay money instead of time to get experience nowadays. And that's where I've started to leverage communities and masterminds and subject matter experts in all areas and pretty much went broke investing in my education so that I didn't have to take the time that it took for experience, but I still learned the same IP that someone might have taken 15 years to learn. In the beginning,
Stop right there because that is so powerful. Like I'm going through a lot of that right now. Like I left my great corporate job to start my own coaching and speaking company. And I'm investing so much money into the growth to cut down the learning curve. Now, I have 30 years experience in leadership and running companies, but I don't have 30 years experience in being a keynote speaker or running a podcast or branding. Like, so I'm writing big checks right now. I'm going in the other direction based off of what I'm making to what it's costing me because I understand the investment. And look, I know that separates me from like 99% of the people that want to do what I want to do because they're afraid to write those checks, right? Or they don't have the money to do it. Luckily, I'd saved my money and did some good investing so I can invest in myself now. But you're right. I mean, I'm putting a lot of money into the business. I've got a call next week with Rory Vaden from Brand Builders. That's a big check that's going to have to be written to help me with my brand. But I know that's what it takes. I pay a lot of money to be in masterminds and go to these big events, meeting Antonio. But Brian and Kobe and I were talking the other day. I said, I just signed up for this big mastermind. I said, boy, when I swipe that American Express, it hurts. But I know that my results are probably going to be 10x of what I spent if I do what I'm supposed to do at the meeting, right? So what do you have to say to people that want to do this, they want to do that, but they're afraid to invest their money back into themselves?
You can only pay with two things. You could rather pay with time or you could pay with money. At least money you can get back, right? That's at least the framework that I've had. And I think especially the younger generation, and I'll consider myself in, let's say 20 to 30, and then the younger generation. I mean, I still consider you in the younger generation because we have so much time, especially if you're investing a lot into your health. But let's just say in the 20s to 30s, there's a little bit of scarcity around paying money for stuff. And with that, like I had said, you could literally only pay with your time or your money. But so many people are so wrapped up in the imposter syndrome that they see on Instagram of like, I have to go be a millionaire now because that's what everyone in society tells me. I would rather continue to pay money to acquire the skill sets that will allow me to be a millionaire forever than just be a flash in the pan early on. So what I'm doing is radically investing back into the skill sets that allow me to secure cash flow for literally forever. Because if I lose it all today, I don't have to start back at level 0. I already have the knowledge of level 10 or wherever I'm at right now. So that's the beautiful thing in it. And that allows you to take a lot more risk because the downside's so low compared to the upside.
People pay Harvard Business School to learn that shit you just taught right there. So like, I'm going to make sure my guy that Logan, my producer, cuts that into a reel because that shit's going to go viral. Like that is,
I appreciate
it's so powerful, Antonio, to think about that. Like, you're right. I can make more. I've lost it all before. I know how it is. But what did I do? I made it all back. I figured out a way to learn from the mistakes and go get it. People that are willing to put in the work in the right areas of their life, sky's the limit, right? And we know a lot of those people, right? Like, I mean, Claudio, he's a beast. What he's been able to do from where he came from. Like, I mean, it's unbelievable for most people who aren't around it. Like when I tell people the kind of things that are out of all these industries that we're in, the opportunities, and they're like, "There's no way." I'm like, I'm just telling you,
that's
dude,
just
like,
a normal Wednesday for you, you know?
yeah. I'm just telling you, like, this is X amount I get paid an hour to coach, and I know that's 7 times what you do as a doctor, but I can't help you. Like but that's what it breaks down to.
And the beautiful thing, sorry to cut you off though, the beautiful thing about that in the ecosystem and the environment that you've created yourself is like, given the relativity of where you're at with your speaking fee, you're probably the lowest paid speaker in the network that you're trying to be in because you're constantly seeking, hire people that are doing more things. And so that's the huge thing of like, what I've noticed a lot about you is your ability to put your ego aside and be able to constantly be a learner because you're at such a high level, but putting yourself at the bottom of the quote unquote totem pole inside of those environments that allow you to stay ambitious and keep moving forward. So kudos to you on that, man. And thank you for inspiring
I appreciate that. I mean, I literally will tell people that I know that are running events like Amberly. When I was in Dallas, I said, hey, if somebody bails within 24 hours of you starting your show, your event in April, call me. I'll get on a flight. I'll come there. I'll speak for free. To get on a stage for Amberly, I would do it for nothing the first time.
100%.
Because I know when I get on stage, I'm going to bring it, right? Because I work every day to be a better speaker and to bring great, powerful content. And the first big stage I ever got on, I literally shot a video to the guy who was running the event. I said, hey, I know your roster's full, but if somebody backs out in the financial services space or anything like that, you let me know and I'm in. 2 days later, he called me and goes, hey, our Northwestern Mutual guy backed out. Can you talk about family finances and budgeting? Done. And I took my whole life story about growing up the son of a drug addict and implemented on all the money habits I learned throughout my life. And I got a standing ovation. But I would have never got that if I hadn't shot that video and sent it to the guy who's running the event.
Mm-hmm. And I think so many people have scarcity around like, what's in it for me short term? The ability to bring such value to someone that needed someone to fill that spot in there is going to result in so much more opportunity than whatever speaking fee that you were, just paid initially. Over time, yeah, it's great. You're going to get eventually 6-figure speaking fees to literally fly there for 30 minutes and then bounce. But right now, we're like still in the point where we want to still build out these ecosystems. It's just fun to do business with all these people as well. So like, if you can even just have your expenses covered to go out there and do some speaking, it's a win-win in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I was so I was able through Ben to meet John Gordon, and I spent some time talking with John Gordon, and we were on a call recently. Actually, there's a chapter in my book about John, and I said, John, I really want to get on more stages and speak. Like that's where that's my passion. Like I just love to speak. And I said, how do I do that? He said, well, Chris, just speak more. And I said, okay, well, like go deep. He goes, speak anywhere and everywhere that they'll let you. Like if there's 3 people in a room and they want you to speak, you speak. Like all you got to do is get the reps in. He said, I wasn't a big time speaker until I wrote the Energy Bus. And when somebody gave the Energy Bus to Jack Del Rio, the head coach for Jacksonville Jaguars, he read it and asked me to come in and speak. So I spoke to the team, and that changed my whole life. So a few weeks ago, somebody I know here in town asked me to come speak at the Rotary event, a Rotary breakfast meeting. I get there, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a waste of time. Like I'm looking around the room, like my avatar's not here. I don't see him. I speak for 15 minutes. When I was done, there was 9 people waiting in line to talk to me one-on-one. Right. And I have 2 clients I'm working right now to negotiate our terms for them to come on as be coaching clients. So it's just getting the more reps in, right? Doing it, even when you don't think it's going to be, you don't think it's the best room for you to be in. But
I had a mentor that, sorry to cut you off. I was saying I had a mentor that's an awesome speaker. And he was basically like, he had a pretty much a personal contract of like, if I ain't speaking, I ain't going. I don't care who's there. I don't care if I'm getting paid for it, but if I'm not rather being edified or speaking, I'm not going. And if you create that as an ultimatum, you're going to have enough at bats in to where, and when the real larger opportunities come, you'll be prepared. And that's something that I'm learning a lot is like, there's really no magic formula. I'm in a season right now where I'm, writing my first book. I want to learn to write better copy and all these things. And I asked Taylor Welch, who's a mentor of mine, he's in my opinion, one of the best in the consulting space. And I was like, hey, like, how did you get so good at writing? He was just like, I sat down and I wrote for 2 hours a day, and I wouldn't get up until I wrote for 2 hours a day. If you force yourself to write 2 hours a day, you're probably going to get better at writing over time. So it really is just putting those reps in. And then the coaching really only matters when you start putting the reps in, because for example, when I was 21, I was reading these leadership books, and, John Gordon and John Maxwell are incredible, but they're not relating as much as now where I'm actually leading a team. So now you have to go back to those things and actually read what you're applying currently in the season of your life. And that's where books, mentorship, and coaching really start to amplify your world.
I'll give you an example of that. So I just finished reading this book again here, which is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Timeless.
This is the 1937 version, right? It's not the updated version or anybody else. This is from 1937. It's the 3rd time I've read that book. That book affected me more this time than any other time. And there's so much in that book from 1937 that's true today. Like it's unbelievable, right? And I'm really involved in masterminds now. Well, Napoleon Hill created the first mastermind on record. Like JP Morgan and Carnegie were in his mastermind. What? I mean, think about that. Like he connected JP Morgan and Carnegie together. Like they didn't even really know who each other were until they got together in the mastermind. So you're right. Reading it in the season of your life. And John Maxwell, you can see the dark blue Jordan there with the black on it. The other one is actually sent to John Maxwell. He's supposed to get it today. So we'll see how that goes. Right. I asked him his shoe size when I met him back in November at an event I was at. That I was on a panel at that event, and he was the keynote. So we had this lunch thing together, and I just said, hey, what's your shoe size? And he's like, oh, it's an 11. I said, cool. So I found out where his address was and shipped him a shoe. So we'll see how that goes with John Maxwell. I'm pretty sure Maxwell will respond to me. That's just the kind of guy he is. Yeah.
He's awesome.
Yep. So as you're building out this business, I want to really think of, how did athletics help you become better in this space? Because you're in the financial services space, I guess is what you would categorize that at. Is that kind of a broad reach?
And when a lot of people think financial services, they think, financial advisory, wealth management. While, we did build out a really robust practice and we still own a wealth management company, our main company is the consulting firm that only works with entrepreneurs, helping them really optimize and strategize, which we like to consider ourselves the anti-advisor because we're almost against the grain of how financial advisors go about building out their business models because it's very product oriented as opposed for the specific business owner. Your business is your best investment. So how can I create an ecosystem that allows you to double down on what's already working? For example, people that I work with that Chris sends me, a lot of real estate investors. Your real estate portfolio is going to massively outweigh, the year one gains in the stock market or whatever you can do there because one, you can control it. And then there's tax benefits and all those different things. So how can I basically meet clients where I'm at to double down on what's already working for them? Because their ability to create active income is what's going to create a much larger retirement or passive income vehicle for them. So with that, sorry, what was your question specifically? I wanted to just
I really wanted to talk to about the discipline and the dedication part of what you learned from sports and even at a collegiate level that is translated over that. Cause I was an athlete and I understand the hard work for being an athlete really pays off. And my avatar, a lot of times when I hire for certain positions is I want them to have excelled in sports or excelled in something else for a long period of time with the discipline. But it's crazy the number of people I know that are in the financial services, that type, or in the mortgage industry or whatever, that played athletics at a high level. I just was curious what you thought your relationship with that was.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think there's two cheat codes in entrepreneurship, really only two ways to cheat the system. One is by paying people for their knowledge. And then two is to be an athlete. Coming out of the world of athletics, entrepreneurship is the only other way, in my opinion, to start simulating what a team culture could look like and competitiveness that sports provided. I was an MLB draft prospect. I played at a really high level with baseball. And one of the main things that I dealt with that, no matter how good of a baseball player you are, the better you are, the better you get at dealing with failure. Because even if you're really good, you're still getting out 6 or 7 times out of 10, whether that's grounding out or striking out, whatever that looks like. And you're going to lose games and all those different things. And so, especially with the way that my career ended very abruptly, in which I didn't have much of a foundation in my life to deal with adversity outside of those small failures in baseball, it taught me down a long path of humbling myself, taking the discipline and the teamwork side of things that I learned from sports and translating it more through business leadership and entrepreneurship. I've now crafted this identity, which I thought I lost, of that of an athlete into a business athlete. And what does an elite business athlete look like? Those are the habits that I started to instill in my life. So an elite business athlete takes care of their family. An elite business athlete takes care of their body. They take care of themselves. They do the necessary key performance indicators inside of their sales ecosystem that allow them, to get to the next level. You take care of your relationships. You're radical about your personal development. I basically tried to reverse engineer what elite business athletes were looking like. And I, used guys like Ed Milet for reference, of guys that came from a really good athletic background and are somewhere where I want to be. I just consumed everything that they did and pride myself on being a really good copycat of reverse engineering what their habits look like. And then I said, okay, let me just make sure I stay committed to this micro system that I can win every day and not worry about the long-term outcome in the short term, and just do that every day. And then eventually get good enough to where I can create my own IP from that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, look, I think it's so important to have athletics as a kid, as you're growing up, or even like a musician as a kid, somebody that you're taught early on that hard work pays off with the discipline and consistency over time. Because if you don't have any of those pillars when you're young, it's hard to learn them as you get older. Like, what do we talk about when we're challenged, we fall back to our habits and our rituals. Well, if I had no habits and rituals growing up, and it was just when things got bad, I just cried about it and did nothing, that's going to be what my life looks like later on. So having that dedication and commitment to a sports team, to a violin instructor, whatever that is, all you're doing is preparing yourself for later on. And I love the fact that you talked about failure, because I talk about it all the time with my clients about, look, if you bat 300, you're in the Hall of Fame. Like that's just like how that works. And it's the same with business. If you close 30% of your leads, you're in the Business Hall of Fame. Like you're on a whole nother level. And if you're closing more than 30% of your leads, you're not getting enough leads.
if 3 out of 10 people respond to you sending them a shoe, that's well worth the investment of the other 7 that didn't, right? All to that nature. It's the law of larger numbers in that world. You only need one big opportunity to hit. And the only way you lose is by not playing the game. One thing that I do regret, which is not, it's something that I couldn't really control at the time, but I would urge people that are still in athletics to start to understand this, is if I understood the level of commitment and obsession that it took to get to a specific goal, like playing in the major leagues, I would be in the major leagues at this point. No doubt. I had the talent. I didn't understand the extra level of nuance that it took to get to that point that I do now. I was obsessed. I was, dedicated and committed, but I thought I was doing what it required, but I was really doing the bare minimum when it comes to being in the elite. And so now I have that chip on my shoulder of like, I'll make sure that damn doesn't happen now. And so I'm not leaving anything off the table. And it's good to be around guys like yourself, like Ben Newman, that definitely ensure as the leaders of the ecosystem that they're not leaving anything off the table and setting the example.
I'll share something. When I was on a call with Ben, my days all run together with a newborn. Like the sleep is not dialed in yet. I think yesterday I was on a call with Ben. Yeah, it was yesterday. And he was talking to us about, he talks about his burn, which is when his why and his purpose connect, right? And he said, you have to understand, I have to go back to that every day. And I've been doing this for a really long time. I still have to go back there and get it, to hold myself accountable to that standard, to keep moving forward. Just because I've gotten where I am today doesn't mean I'm going to stop. And if I did, I'd fall back. And I can look back at times in my life. I mean, I made $1 million before I was 29 years old. Like I was making 7 figures, right? But then I stopped working. I got lazy. Like I literally just did nothing. Like, cause I thought I'd hit the mountaintop, right? And then lost everything. So when you look at high performers, the majority of them are working harder today than they did when they were younger, because that's what it takes to maintain and grow, but they're working on it in the right areas. Ben talks about all the time, he still has 2 coaches and reads books every day. Well, I have 2 coaches and I read every day. Why? Because if I'm not the best version of myself when I hop on a podcast to be interviewed, when I hop on a coaching call with my clients, I'm letting myself and everybody else down. So when you're getting ready to hop on, like, how do you stay in tune to make sure you're ready to go, to bring it on these calls? Because again, you're getting on there with some pretty high level people. How do you make sure that you're bringing it at a level of an intensity that needs to be brought?
Sure. And to your point, just to revert back to what you were saying, I think Ben's done a great job of helping me identify what success is, and success in those specific areas are not about getting there. It's about how long you could stay there, how long you could survive that success. And that's a huge nuance that I've started to carry in my daily life, which then translates to that question that you had just asked me. It's really about the habits. I've read enough books like James Clear's Atomic Habits that allow me to put this question on my whiteboard that I have every day that says, are my habits a reflection of who I want to become? And even though that we run a consulting agency, I operate it like I'm a coach. I literally operate like I have equity in my clients' companies, because literally all that matters. And I get into fights with my business partner sometimes about this, because the only thing that matters is our client experience. If I could go to bed knowing that my clients feel good about this, I could always mend my business partnerships. And maybe there's an optimal way to go about that to make everyone happy. But it's the client first, last, and always. And so with that, how do I give the client the best experience? It's by me showing up the best and most optimal every time I have an opportunity to impact their lives. And so with that, it's that whole concept of discipline equals freedom from Jocko Willink. Like, do I have a system of habits and inbuilt into my calendar that allow me to show up in a peak state all the time? That is not going to happen all the time, though. Like, my peak state is not always there, but that's where I've paid enough, just like you have, to be a part of ecosystems like Ben Newman's that tell you how to show up in a peak state even when you're not, and creating those emotional triggers that allow you to say, damn, I feel like shit today, excuse my language, but I got 5 minutes till this podcast. Perfect example is even today, I was not feeling optimal, and I had texted you and tried to use this as a cop out of like, hey, Chris, I see Fridays available. That's when I have all my podcasts today. I'll be in a better framework to do this on Friday. And I was like, you know what? part of me is hoping that Chris says that that slot's not available, because now I have to build the muscle of showing up when I don't want to. It's not that I didn't want to show up here. I was just starting to be like, I'm not fully in my zone right now of genius, and I'm not going to be able to provide the most value to Chris's community right now. And I hold Chris in really high regard. So I want to make sure that I built out where I can be the most optimal. But it's just not how life works. We're just going to get thrown opportunities that we have to show up in. And so how can I build enough habits that allow me to, in an instant, turn the switch on and then recharge the battery? And that really comes with understanding yourself and self-awareness, which is why we invest so much time and money into understanding ourselves, because that really is the own goal. Like the learning of the information, the ability to articulate is something that you can learn over time, and pretty much everyone could do at this point. But taking the time to get out of your own way by learning about yourself is the toughest thing that at least I've had to battle with. So to that point, really all I'm doing is training on how to get out of my own way so that I can just allow my subconscious to operate.
Yeah, most of the time I don't want to know that much about myself because I'm not impressed.
That's okay. That's the point, right?
Yeah, it is. Once you figure that out, it is. And to kind of pile on what you're talking about is always being ready, like, right. Always being ready. And you shared this moment with me, which was just an incredible moment for me. We were at an event in Dallas with Renee Rodriguez, and Renee just says, "Hey, I'm going to pull somebody out of the crowd and get them on stage to speak today. Just they have no idea they're speaking." And I get back from lunch and he pulls me out of the crowd and says, "Here's the mic, do your thing." And I'm like, I had zero preparation, none. And I had texted Renee like April last year and said, "Hey man, how do I get on stage at AmpCon?" I mean, I was just like, I want to be on the roster, right? Mm-hmm. And he's like, "You really want to do that?" I said, "Yeah." Well, he took that to heart and pulled me out of the crowd and put me on stage, but I was ready. Like, I mean, because I practice all the time and I make sure I operate and run at a high standard when I get my reps in. So I was ready to go. 2 years ago, I would have never been able to do that. I'd have got on stage and I would have just been like, I don't know what, but
that was
right.
Always
being ready.
Man. You crushed it. And to that point, like, you may have never spoken physically at AmpCon, but you spoke at AmpCon 1,000 times before that in your head and in your preparation. And that's where the whole visualization tactic comes in. It's not corny. It's not about shouting affirmations in the mirror, but it's about understanding that this opportunity is going to come. So let me visualize myself so that I'm prepared when it does. That's what the best level athletes, and why I pretty much translate everything to athletics, because those moments are, they're under a microscope in athletics and they show up everywhere in your life. And so, yeah, I would have never known that you'd never spoke at AmpCon before, because you crushed it, dude.
Yeah, it was, what's funny is I got there early that morning because I always like to sit in the very front seat in the row. And I talk about that in my book, but where I sit, and it's not because I want to be up front. It's because I have ADD real bad. If you sent me 3 or 4 rows back, I'm not going to pay attention to anything.
Sure.
So I snuck in there at like 6 a.m. and marked off the 2 spots in the very front row for Brian Covey and I to sit right in the front. And then when I came in, I got in early before everybody else got in, and I got up on stage. And I do that everywhere I go to an event. I try to sneak on stage just to see what it'd feel like being on stage. I mean, I've done it countless times, and that happened to be the day where he pulled me up there and made it happen. But you're right. The visualization aspect of it, what most people don't understand is this part about visualization. You're visualizing whether you know it or not. It's just most of the time you're visualizing about how bad things are going to be and not how great they're going to be. And it has just as much of an outcome, control your outcome by the negative sides. We've all done that. We've all thought about, oh God, this relationship's going to be so bad, or this meeting is going to be so bad. And we bring that onto ourselves. I visualize 99% of the time. I mean, like every day, I might miss one day out of 100, but I've done it for so long. And then when things start happening, you're like, oh shit, like, I've been thinking about this for like 3 years, and this is happening right now. Like my subconscious starts working for it, and you go after it. Right. And I practice. I'm a big guy about practice. I love to practice. I love to record my Zoom meetings with my clients and go back and look at it. Now I have AI telling me what I did right and did wrong. And because that's how I get better. Right. And watching game film. I was a big guy in game film when I played athletics. Love to watch game film. I was a nerd about game film. And that's the same thing I do at business.
Mm-hmm. It's so well said. Training. And that was a huge part of a takeaway that I took at Renee's AmpCon last time, was like, hey, like I could do pretty well without constantly sharpening the sword, but what if I took the time to seriously start training like an athlete again. And then I parlayed that with listening to how Andy Elliott goes about it. And they are so radical about training. And then I kind of reverse engineered my calendar to where like I'm not taking client meetings until like 11 o'clock. And everything before that is training, coaching calls, training, personal development work, because that is what takes, that's what really gets you to the next level. And to your point of the, the visualizing and the manifestation, I like to call it positive brainwashing, right? Like we have to continuously flood our subconscious with this stuff because we're naturally wired to just go back into the fear state of like, what's going to keep me alive? And usually that's not the most optimal outcome for success. So now I have to radically overcompensate. So for every bad thought I have to go have 10 good thoughts, at least in the way I operate, so that negates that one bad thought. And I continuously build out the confidence of being able to be prepared every single time. So I really love the way you articulated that. And that's why I love podcasting, man. When we first started, the reason why we started a podcast is because we could not afford mentorship. So I would have guys like Chris on to learn from them because I couldn't afford to pay him. So I would just selfishly start asking questions and then just go radically implementing everything that he told us to do because he was where I wanted to be. And with that, we eventually did that long enough to become valuable enough to then bring a value proposition to them offline. And that sparked into more joint ventures. That leads to more confidence, which leads to more training, which leads to more network. And then you get more money, you get more, attributes and more things. But really, it's just about continuing to level up the process. And then once you have it all figured out, in my opinion, the money thing takes care of itself. Now it's about finding really cool people to do business with and do life with, which like Chris is somebody that I want to just continuously travel the speaking circuit with. I want to go to all these masterminds because we just have fun, man. It's just so fun to learn. And I love being around those high performers because that's really all I can relate about. And it's probably not the most sustainable way to live. Like Kobe Bryant, the way that he lived was probably not cool for 99% of people that think that's what life is. It's much better than the alternative, which is kind of being a loser. That's at least the way that I've started to justify how my brain works in this space, because the other alternative is not what I want. So let me just at least dive into this space. So,
well, it comes down to not doing it for everyone else, right? Doing it for yourself. And usually when people say you're crazy, it's because they're not willing to do it. So speaking of crazy, I wanted to dive into that like long ass fast you did. Because I know we were texting and DMing through that. So I was trying to be one of your support systems through that crazy ass fast. I think as high producers, we are always trying to find these physical challenges that push us a little bit, and we learn from that. Like I did the David Goggins challenge, which was ran 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. I did 2 extra miles, so I turned 50 that week. And I needed that, right? I needed to push myself. But Les, I want to know, would you do that fast again? And what were the toughest part of it?
I will do that fast probably once a quarter for the rest of my life. I think it's a really good reminder for us as high performers that most of the time, the best solution is subtraction, not addition. I think a lot of the times we think we have to constantly be adding more things. What am I not doing? But usually it is what am I doing that I probably shouldn't be, that is going to get me more leverage and more margin. And so with that, depriving myself of food started to my highest intention was to every single time I get hungry, I'm going to confide in God, because who the hell am I to think that I have the power to control this and not give it to him? That's a personal belief of mine. I know Chris shares the same values, so I'm hoping his audience does as well. That was a really huge success piece that I got out of it. Was every time that I feel uncontrollably hungry, I'm going to pray, and I'm going to pray through this moment and rely on God's strength for this. And that got me through it. It seriously did. Also, it forced me to just continuously keep myself busy or get on a good sleep schedule, because it is grueling. The first 24 hours aren't as bad. But once you get to unknown territory, which for me was like 48 hours, it was definitely tough. I got all the way to 96, which was 4 days. And so with that, it really started to allow me to understand that most of the time, I'm not that hungry. It's just everything around me revolves around food. Everyone around me is just eating garbage and doing all these things. And it showed me that I truly have power over this thing if, my mindset just allows to stay in control of it. And I continue to confide in my creator around it. Same thing with 75 hard. Like I find it really tough to stay, very controlled on my diet. But when I'm on 75 hard, it's not even a question. It's a non-negotiable. And so what those challenges allow you to realize is how much you're willing to compromise on your non-negotiables. And I think that you can find a healthy, a quote unquote balance. I don't think balance is really the word, like a harmony, a harmonious lifestyle that works for you, because always being 100% on is probably not a lifestyle that all of us want to experience. Because I personally enjoy eating cookies at times and things like that. But I think if we can find this balance of going radical to the extent of where we no longer think we can go, and then maybe dialing back to a system that allows us to stay 85, 90% consistent on that, I think that's a really healthy lifestyle that I've allowed myself to create. And so I'm just going to constantly go find challenges that are things that are going to push me to the next level. Like Nathan Mansfield, who I've connected you with, he's a client of mine, one of my favorite humans. He's got, people going out to do like kind of this Navy SEAL style training where you're sleep deprived and you're going through that. Breaking yourself down is the only way to continuously find those limits for yourself. And if you don't go searching, you're always going to wonder what is. And I refuse to let, regret fuel me down the road. So I'm going to just go find it. That's really my take on it.
Yeah, I'm searching for the next one now. I mean, I've done 75 hard 3 times.
Mhm.
And right now I'm doing the raising an infant strategy,
That's
which is
definitely a tough strategy.
which which is a true blessing to be 51 years old and have a newborn son. But it's definitely, he controls my calendar and my time. And I really have to, I have my cold plunge out in the garage and I get in there 5 or 6 days a week and I get my workouts in, but I'm starving for that next big challenge. So once he gets his sleep to where he sleeps for 6 or 7 hours straight in the night, then I'm going to figure out what that is and get back on it, because I know I need it. The amount of growth I got just from 75 hard the first time was a complete game changer for me. It put me on a different trajectory as a person.
Mm-hmm.
I learned so much about myself. And if you've never done the Goggins challenge, you got to try it. You'll learn a lot about yourself there. I would never do it again. Not going to do it again. The damage my feet sustained was just insane, but I did it. I finished, and I had someone with me every time. Somebody ran on every single run with me. Didn't matter. My wife probably went on 5 of them with me, but I had people around the clock with me, helping me get to the finish line. So it was a pretty big deal. So just as we wrap this up, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, and why should people reach out and talk to Antonio?
2 specific reasons why I believe. One, the best way to reach out to me is probably Instagram. My Instagram is Vaglica, Avaglica. I'm responsive on there. We post a lot of content. You'll get a good idea of kind of what we do professionally. I don't have appointment setters. I don't believe in like just randomly cold messaging people. I'm very against it, as you'll probably see on my Instagram. I think that's the new pandemic nowadays, is like people that don't follow you, they like all your pictures, then out of nowhere they just message you like, hey, if I could double your business overnight, would you hire me? Like, no, because you actually have no
I think
idea
you had a
what
post about that
is.
today, didn't you? Didn't you post something about
Yeah.
that last day or so? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's very fresh in my mind, because you start to realize that this person knows nothing about business if they think they could double my business overnight. Right. Like, gosh, it's almost offensive of like all the work that we've put in for this. But regardless, 2 specific pain points that if you're looking to get out, that my content I think will serve. One, being young and trying to navigate this thing of life. It's a fucked up world. Excuse my language, but it's not easy. It's not easy to be a high performer when all of your friends back home are probably being crabs in a bucket, and they love you. They're not trying to do it, but they're just not on the same trajectory that you're looking to be on. So follow me on that journey. I talk a lot about it. And then 2, if you're a business owner primarily doing high 6, 7, 8 figures, that feels like they're paying too much in taxes, don't know how to protect the money, and don't know how to create alignment around your strategy and all of your financial professionals, we run a fractional family office that we can plug in to your business to make sure that everything, that you're not leaving any meat on the bone inside of your business. So that's kind of what we do.
Okay. I love it. I've referred him to several of my clients and friends. And I've got a list of more people that we'll talk about when we get off the call here that I'm meeting with, that we're going to get introductions as well, man. So I appreciate you and the relationship we've built. And man, I can't wait to see where we take this thing.
I agree, man. I just want to take the time to appreciate you. When we had met, we didn't connect as in depth in that in Vegas. There was, it was a larger room, 13 people that we were connecting with, and it was only a 2-hour thing. But then we had the opportunity to go to Dallas, and I think, God works in some amazing ways that allows us to connect. And I think after that moment, we were like, hey, like let's continuously find a way to be a part of each other's lives. And I just want to express some gratitude to you, man, because you are a radical connector. You are someone that inspires me on a daily basis. I cannot explain to you how happy I am of you having your baby, man, and just seeing the smile on your face. I know it's challenging, given how disciplined you are to your schedule, but I love you, brother, and I
Thanks,
appreciate
man.
that so much, man. So thank you for the opportunities.
Thanks. I appreciate you, man, for sure. Thank you for tuning into the One Hand at a Time podcast. Please make sure you like and share the episode, and we'll see you next time here at the One Hand at a Time podcast. Make it a great day.